working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for you is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for you.
Good afternoon and welcome to Working for You. I am Roy Williams, your host. We thank you very much for tuning in to today's program, wherever you are in the world. Today we will be discussing something that is one of the basic necessities of life, something very critical to our survival as human beings, something very critical to the importance to all living things. In some organisms, of course, up to 90% of their body weight comes from water. And up to 60% of the human adult body is water. Water is life. We cannot survive without it. Today I have with me the manager of the St. Kitts Water Services Department, and who is also a water engineer by profession. I have with me Mr. Dennison Paul. Mr. Paul, welcome to this program.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'm happy for the opportunity to come and share the information that is critical, particularly for the next couple of months, this dry season.
Okay, we are on the eve, Mr. Paul, the cusp, if you want to say that, of what is called World Water Day, which is an annual observance day, which is celebrated, commemorated on the 22nd of March by the United Nations. And I think it is in its 25th year, World Water Day. I think it goes back, its first one was in 1993. But it is a day when, you highlight the importance of water. Not just water, but fresh water. And it is a day that is used to advocate for the sustainable management of freshwater resources.
Exactly.
Of course, the Water Services Department in St. Kitts is responsible for the management of that critical resource that we refer to as simply as water, or as the Spanish people will say, agua. Tell us, what is World Water Day?
Well, as you alluded to earlier, it was the United Nations felt it important to highlight the importance of water. And so in 1993, they designated this 22nd of March of every year as World Water Day. You did say it's a time to focus on the importance of water. At times, it spends a lot of time focusing on the challenges, and we are facing challenges now. So it's an opportune time in the midst of the dry season for us to discuss some of the challenges. In fact, this year's theme is Nature for Water. What that speaks to is that we should manage the water in a sustainable way. Not relying only on what they call great infrastructure, concrete and mortar, but green infrastructure. For example, if our stream beds are eroding or cliff beds are eroding, they don't expect us to use only concrete. They expect us to use green technology. What could that be? That could be grass with roots that bind the soil together. So this is the approach we are taking, okay, in terms of managing the resource.
Okay, so it is an approach, in other words, where the solution to things like floods and droughts and water pollution, that the solution is really nature-based.
Nature-based, exactly.
So it is found in nature.
Exactly. For example, I argue that we are the largest user of electricity on the island. Lots of folks don't know that, but 75% of our water comes from underground, sometimes 300 feet underground.
Mhm.
And how do you get water from underground? There's a saying, it takes force make water go uphill.
Right.
Well, it takes energy, and electrical energy in our instance, to take that water from underground way up in storage reservoirs, and then we can feed it down to the populace. And so energy is required. And so we're looking forward to the government, I know, has plans and advanced stages of investing in solar energy. I'm talking about a 10, 16 megawatt solar farm, right? We are also seriously considering geothermal. And so these have minimal carbon footprints. And so that is a sustainable way of development. In terms of drought, we are advising our people to harvest rainwater, right?
Yes.
When you harvest rainwater, the water falls on your roof, it collects it in some sort of a container. That means that we don't have to spend monies in electricity getting the water from underground. It also means that you are to a certain extent independent. After the passage of a hurricane, you can have water stored there for 2, 3, 4 weeks while we try to get the mains back on. So
Okay.
these are sustainable ways, nature-based ways to manage the resource.
Certainly. Now, I was reading some statistics that more than 2 billion people in the world lack access to safe drinking water, and more than double that number lack access to safe sanitation. And that with a rapidly growing global population, demand for water is expected to increase by nearly 1/3 by 2050. Of course, you know that the goal 6 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes the importance of ensuring the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation. And that, of course, this year's theme, as you so clearly explained, speaks to the nature-based solutions that are essential to meeting this goal 6 of the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, of course, you know that in St. Kitts and Nevis we have an increasing population. We have, of course, more hotels that are coming on stream. More houses. The government has a housing program and so on. More homes that are being built. And so therefore, the demand for water is increasing. And we have to really meet that challenge of really making water available, accessible to people. And not only that, but the quality as well. So we are talking here about water security.
Yes, sir. Well said. It seems that you've done your research. Fortunately for us, and I think generations or successive governments over the years must be given credit for this, in that we have universal access to water in St. Kitts and Nevis. Many countries can't boast of that. Everyone has access to water. In fact, 98% of our population has access to pipe-borne water in their homes.
Yes.
All right? 2% of our people do not. But there are standpipes. Last check, 260 standpipes, public standpipes, scattered all over the island. And even with that access, my minister, the minister responsible for water, has pledged that he intends to provide pipe-borne water to each home in St. Kitts.
Yes.
He's saying that that is a goal of the Unity Administration. Okay? So we are much more fortunate than folks in faraway places.
Okay.
In terms of the quality, our water quality is excellent in most instances. We have 26 wells. You get the water to the top of the well, we call it the wellhead, you pump it up there, you make a test. Of the 26 wells, excellent quality. Surface supplies, they're exposed to the environment, and so there's potential for contamination, leaves and animals and all that. But as of 2 years ago, all of our surface supplies are being disinfected through the means of chlorination. So we have universal access and we have excellent quality water for our populace.
Okay. Now, with such an important, very critical, essential resource, that of water, I know that every year, the World Water Day, around the world, there are activities planned around World Water Day. In fact, I really believe that every day should be World Water Day, because it is such an important resource. But the Department of Water Services here in St. Kitts, what are some of the activities that are planned around World Water Day?
Okay.
How do you plan to celebrate?
Each year we celebrate. Usually our celebration is a week long, but this year it's extended. First reason for the times, we need more time because of the times we're in. And for the second reason, we spend a lot of time at the schools.
Sure.
They are the future. We know we want to spread the message, we get it to the school kids. And so this week, they're involved in exams. And I think next week as well. Okay? So we have opted to visit the schools in April. Late April when they return from vacation. But so far, we have worshipped at the Wesley Methodist Church. That was on Sunday. We had a ministerial speech. The minister responsible for water, Honorable Ian Patches Liber,
Yes.
gave a speech. We're making media appearances like this one. Okay? We also have staff who are making presentations at the light manufacturing industry, C.A. Paul Industrial Estate. I was fortunate to be there yesterday. I visited Jaro. And it was a pleasant sight to see. Over 300 persons, mainly females, being very interactive, very engaged in the presentation. And so, for the first time, we are going to industrial estates. And I think it makes sense because, you know, most of our homes are headed by females. They're the ones who, in most instances, actually pay the water bills. They're the ones who have to tell the kids to get out of the bath after 20 minutes and not to waste water. So we've targeted them, and so far it seems that the feedback has been excellent. Later on, I think it is scheduled for Saturday, April 28th at 9 o'clock. We have what we've dubbed a watercade. It's a whistle stop around the island,
Yes.
where we collaborate and cooperate with other government departments, including NHC, including Sustainable Development, Planning, Parks and Beaches. We go around the island and we preach the gospel of water conservation. So we stay in a couple of the residential areas and we interact with the public. We have pamphlets, information, we give out goodies, you know, to highlight the importance of water and its conservation.
I know that we can overlook the importance of water, especially when it is in abundance. And it is only when there's a saying, basically, you only miss the water when the well runs dry. And it is so true, because when you have the water, sometimes you don't even appreciate the fact that you have the water. And when you have an abundance of it, sometimes, you know, you can waste it. And my mother always used to say, willful waste makes woeful want. And so, especially with what is happening in our world today, that you can speak to it, we are getting less rainfall. The climate is changing. And with all of that, we have to look at how we can manage this precious resource, and yet how it can remain sustainable, not just for this generation, but for the generations to come. We waste a lot of water. Now, in terms of waste water management, I think the theme for last year's World Day, if I am not mistaken, had to do with you know, why waste water? And how do we manage wastewater? Because a lot of the water, let's face it, Mr. Paul, is wasted. And maybe sometimes our catchment facilities and procedures are really not where it really should be. And so we have a lot of runoff water that is not really, you know.
Let me respond to that. We have two main sources of water in St. Kitts. We have groundwater, which represents about 75% of the supply. Surface water, the streams and not rivers, but the streams you see at Old Road and College Street, 25%. The challenge is what you have considered to be wasted after heavy rainfall. We do not have the treatment systems to treat that water. You remember when you see it running down?
Yes.
It's brown and it's heavy and it's dirty. We don't have the capacity to treat that. In fact, internationally, in most instances when you have that heavy rainfall, that water is allowed to go to waste because it is so difficult to purify. Okay? And so we have a challenge. The water we serve you from the surface sources, that water is pristine. After that runoff, we then collect that water with a basic treatment to it, and then we disinfect it and distribute it to the public. Okay? But in terms of waste, I am putting the onus on the consumers. Why? I'll give you one statistic. Antigua's population is about 80,000. St. Kitts is about 35,000. St. Kitts uses about 6 million gallons of water per day. Antigua uses 4 to 4.5. That says something. I have described it as a culture of waste. Why do we waste water? Because for years, water was reliable. I have been working at the water department from the day I left school, 34 years now. And this is the first time I'm experiencing the levels of rationing. People were accustomed to reliable supply, and so they take it for granted. The other issue is that the water is cheap. I meet with my colleagues throughout the region. We meet sometimes once a year, 2 times a year, and we discuss our issues, we discuss our tariffs. We have the lowest tariff in the region. Dominica has 365 rivers. They pay more for water than we do. I am not really advocating for increasing the tariff rates generally, because I know there are some who we would have to protect. But at least I think those who can afford to pay for the water should pay for it.
Yes.
Okay? And so there's wanton waste. That is an issue we have to address. We have been trying over the years to zero in and to be giving tips here and there later in the program. I'll give you a few tips. But it's behavior we have to change, and it's ingrained in us. And so there are a lot of things we do that do not augur well for the future of this most precious resource.
Now, in terms of how must I put it? Now, the department has a staff. What are some of the things that the staff is involved in to ensure that water is available to communities?
Okay. Before I answer that, let me refer to the program. And to say that we have on our program of activities, on D-Day World Water Day, is a cleanup campaign at our only water treatment plant. It's at Lagreed. Most people in Boston now, they refer to it as a reservoir. Okay, so we're going to have a cleanup campaign there. But to answer your question, what do our staff, how do they engage themselves in terms of the management of resource? We have lots of skilled people at the water department. Folks may not know. Recently, we had the services of Dr. Siheli, PhD engineer. We had Conrad Williams, hydrogeologist and civil engineer. I am an environmental engineer myself. My assistant is an environmental engineer trained in Taiwan. I was trained in the US. Okay? We have draftspeople because we have to map all of our assets, the pipelines, our tanks, our pumps. We have a construction crew. We construct a lot of our infrastructure. We have technicians, plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians, and then we have support staff, customer services. We also have IT people because we have a billing system to manage. And so we have significant levels of skilled people at the water department. And basically, you referred to that earlier, our job is to manage the resource in a sustainable manner. We are also trying to make the resource as affordable as possible. And so it is a difficult task. In the sector, we say that water is not sexy. Nobody sees us, okay? Our pipes are on the ground, our tanks are way up in the forest, in the hills, our sources as well are in the hills. And a lot of the water, 75% of the water is on the ground. Nobody sees it. But we do a difficult job. In fact, we are now experiencing an issue in St. Peter's. I had staff that worked from 7 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the morning and got up 7 o'clock in the morning and worked until midnight, you understand? Because water is life.
Yes.
And we understand how important the resource is, and we don't want to keep people out of the resource for too long. You can survive with electricity. Water is important. I'm a relatively skinny guy, but the average person can live 28 days without food. I'm skinny, I might live 21, 22.
Yeah.
You might live 30.
I might live off some of my fat.
I can guarantee you, if you have no water for 5 days, you perish. Water is that important. We take it for granted. We should not.
Right. Now, you just highlighted, of course, some of the challenges of what your staff faces in terms of maintaining this precious resource and making sure that it is available to communities. Now, there are some communities that have been affected recently in terms of water availability around the clock. And the department has had to implement what we call water rationing. Could you tell us why water rationing? Why the department has had to implement water rationing, and what the department is doing in terms of correcting the water shortage?
I'm happy that the problem was stated. I'm happy I have an opportunity to inform the public of how we intend to correct the problem. Okay? But yes, why do we have a water shortage? We have a finite amount of water in the world. We have drilled wells. The wells have what we call a safe yield. We can only pump X amount of water out of the well. If you pump more than that, you run into problems.
Yes.
We are beginning to run into problems because over the years we have been pumping more than what we call a sustainable yield.
Yes.
So we have a problem. Most of our wells are what we call coastal wells and coastal aquifers, and so they're pretty close to the sea. And when you withdraw more water than you should, salt water starts replacing the fresh water. That is what is happening to us now. And so we have to be careful. And so even though at times we can pump more water out of the ground,
yes,
then we intentionally reduce what we call our abstraction rates. The other issue is that it is the dry season. And the dry season has been very dry. And so, for example, Phillips or Green Hill intake, right now the flows are about half what they used to be. So we're already at the margins when we operate on a normal basis. And then we get 25% of the water from surface sources. And then you lose 50% of that. That means you're already 12, 13% down.
Yes.
And you are operating at the margins. We have a particular issue in St. Peter's. We are now rationing in St. Peter's. There is a well in the Taylor's area. That well pumps all the way to Stapleton, Gunderfield. Gunderfield is near Cedar Grove. We're talking about 600 feet above sea level. We have issues with that pump. That pump now only pumps to White House by the ATM, where Balang sells his stuff. That's 400 feet. So we are We designed and we're now constructing a pumping system to pump that water now from White House to the higher tanks. It is advanced. I think in a couple of days we would have completed. I want to commend the staff,
Sure.
engineering staff at Skelec. I called them on Saturday night. By Sunday morning we were on site with 3 of Skelec engineers designing the electrical system so that we can power that pump. So the work was completed, I think it was last night. So I want to take this opportunity to commend them for the haste and efficiency in which the project was completed.
Does the Water Services Department, do they need to explore more wells?
Okay.
And what are you doing in terms of the rehabilitation
Okay.
of those wells that are probably extremely old?
Again, another good question. Government has invested in it's a 13.8, approximately $14 million project to drill additional wells. In fact, some of those wells are near completion, and so I am confident that we should be seeing movement in the not too distant future to augment our water supply. The contract was for 2 million gallons per day. We are now using 6.
Yes.
2 divided by 6, that's 33% increase in the amount of water we should have available to us, maybe in the next 6 months. So that is being done. Some of the wells are old, yes, very old, 50 years approximately. And so on a regular basis, we have to be doing maintenance. We have to pull out everything, get a crane and pull out everything and clean up and put it back down, okay? But to go further, the water we have now, even that 2 million, I don't think would suffice. You said earlier that we have had a boom in tourism and
Yes.
other types of development. We have a housing boom. Successive governments have been building houses. And particularly in the St. Peter's area, I've looked at the census data, last census data, and almost every parish, the population was about stable. St. Peter's grew by 17%.
Wow.
You understand? Basse is being squeezed. You can't go east. You can't build anything east of Basse. You can't build anything west now. You can't go south. So everybody's going north. And so that is putting pressure on the water system. And so we have to react. In fact, the wells I mentioned to you, 2 of them are in that the Shadwell area, which will be able to provide St. Peter's with water. So we are looking forward, and I can guarantee you that our heads are not in the sand.
Okay. I understand that there's an ongoing well drilling project. Do you care to speak a little bit about that?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it has
Sure.
to do with BEAD, Bedrock Exploration and Development. That is a company out of the US that drilled in Nevis before and are now drilling in Nevis again.
Yes.
But they have been drilling for us. There were some issues which I think have been ironed out now, but they have already, as I said, drilled about 1.2 million gallons of water. Both of them are in the Shadwell area. They did advanced work in the Challenges Old Road area where they have about 400,000 gallons. And then they also intend to drill in Keon. And from preliminary reports, it appears that Keon is awash with water.
Okay.
So the prospects are good. And so government has invested time and money, and so the population should be reaping the dividends in the short term.
Now, you spoke a lot about the challenges and so on. Of course, we have man-made. Sometimes the reason why there are challenges is because of those made by man. And of course, we have the challenges, that come about through environmental degradation and the depleting of ecosystems and so on. Do you care to speak a little bit about that?
Okay, yes I do. For example, and again government was proactive in that regard, we have our surface water sources. And so if there's agricultural activity above those surface sources, number one, you have increased erosion, you have siltation, If you're using agrochemicals, whether it be the fertilizers or pesticides, whatever, they contaminate the water supply.
Yes.
And so there must be a sustainable approach. What the government did was to say that there is no agricultural activity above any of our water sources. That is a proactive, that is a sensible thing to do. So that is a classic example of how you manage the resource. In terms of our wells, most of our best yielding wells are in what we call the Basti Valley Aquifer. It was declared a national park.
Yes.
No development in that area. Why? Because there was agricultural activity there, potential for contamination of the groundwater. And we are also looking at what is happening upstream, because that St. Peter's area, water moves on the ground. And whatever contaminations are there can move downstream and affect the aquifer. And so I am a member of the Development and Planning Board, and we have been more stringent in the way people, particularly in that area, design and operate and construct the wastewater systems, because we want to protect this resource for generations that come.
Now, going forward, of course, what would you say to members of the public how they can reduce their water use to conserve water? What would be some of the tips that you can give to the public?
Okay, I have a number of tips. The first one, we have to reinvest in the water. So the very first one, I want you to remember this: pay your water bills. That helps a lot. Okay, but we're asking you to report leaks. You see a leak on the island, Marion, you see a leak anywhere, we want you to report it. And the number to call is 465-8000. 465-8000. Okay? Throughout the island, we have divided the island into districts. And so each area has a district supervisor. And that person is responsible for dealing with issues that are minor issues, not too difficult to deal with. If they're too difficult, then they call forces from headquarters to deal with them. Okay? And so in each area there's an area supervisor, overseer. We would like you to know who that area supervisor is. So if there's an issue, you can talk to him. You know hers yet. You can talk to him. We want you to protect the water sources. We don't want people, and we have this problem, where tourists in particular, non-nationals, head up to our water sources. Every single one of them is fenced, and there's a sign there saying no trespassing. Sometimes we go there, we see tourists there. So we want members of the public, they're drinking the water, we want them to be our eyes and ears and to report when this is happening. We want you to use water wisely.
Yes.
Use water only when you have to, and in minimal amounts. We want you to check your household for plumbing. And after all those years of experience in the water sector, the main culprit is the toilet. How do you know if your toilet have a leak? There are two ways. Two main ways. In the middle of the night, when everyone is asleep and you get up to do whatever you have to do, you hear shh. That sound you hear is a leaking toilet. And the thing with the leaking toilet is that it goes on 24/7. So a lot is like having a tap open 24/7. It does another thing. It fills your septic. So your water bill is high, and then your septic gets filled, and you have to pay money to pump your septic. So monitor your toilets. There's another test you can do. Anything that is colored. I can't remember the last time I see Kool-Aid, but Kool-Aid would be a good, what you call it, that thing you brown, you're browning.
Right.
Okay? You pour that into your tank. Your toilet tank. The toilet tank is full. Your bowl should not have any indications of
Okay.
If the bowl gets colored, it means that the water is leaking into the bowl and going into your septic. Those are two ways to test. But 99% of the times when someone has a leak and they come to the office, it's the toilet. Not always, but most of the times, it's the toilet. That's where you check first. Talking about irrigation, it's really dry now. Some of us have backyard garden. Some of us has ornamental plants. If you're irrigating, we prefer you don't use sprayer or hose. You collect the water in a container and you water the roots. For people on a larger scale, if you're designing irrigation systems, we recommend you use drip. and not spray.
Yes.
When you spray the waters in the environment, we have what you call evapotranspiration. The water just evaporates all over the place. Washing. I'm responsible for washing where I live.
You are?
Yes.
Okay.
And we wash large loads, right? Make sure that the wash machine is full. You do two things that way. You save water and you save on electricity. It is not necessary because you have a favorite outfit, you decide you're going to put that alone in the washing machine. Wasting energy and you're wasting water. There are other things you can do, like investing in what we call low flow devices. Your faucet, your tap, your shower head. They're at the stores, they're a little bit more expensive. We're encouraging government to, give tax exemptions or reductions in them. You give concessions. And so they automatically, when you open your tap and your pressure is high, they automatically reduce the flow. So that you're actually saving water that way. You don't have to shower for 20 minutes. That's a favorite pastime of Kittians. But whenever they go to Antigua, St. Thomas or St. Croix, they can't do it. All right? Behavioral change. We have to change that.
I know sometimes, Mr. Paul, what happens is that when you're brushing your teeth,
Yes.
you leave the tap on. So the water is running
Yes.
and you're brushing your teeth. A lot of
That's a
people do
no-no. That was my last point. So,
Okay. I know for a fact that people do that. Now, I want to ask this interesting question. Do you think that less people are drinking tap water, and why? Now, when I was growing up, we drank tap water. We really didn't know so much about bottled water and imported water and this thing about purified water and all this sort of a thing. This has become very prevalent now, and I am wondering why. Is it that we have lost confidence in drinking the water because we do not think that it is safe, and that this bottled water somehow is safer for drinking purposes? What is the impact really in terms of usage? How does that impact usage of water?
Okay. Let's say that bottled water started as a fad. It was something you looked cool drinking bottled water. Maybe it still happens, but I can guarantee you that the quality of the public drinking water is as good as, and I can tell you exceeds bottled water. I'll tell you why. There is additional protection
Yes.
with our water. How do we achieve that? Some people do not like to hear it, but by chlorination. And when we chlorinate the water supply, what we do, we kill all of the contaminants, the microorganisms in that body of water. And what we do, we have what we call a residual. A little bit extra. You know what that is for? When it's traveling along the pipeline. When you drink from a dirty glass, that extra chlorine is supposed to handle that. If you leave your water outside, your bottled water outside, and for some reason it gets contaminated by something flying into it, that chlorine will take care of that. Okay?
Right.
But I think that the wide use of bottled water, I think, has to do with, number one, convenience. It's convenient to haul around a bottle of water. It's convenient for me. And the other issue is the taste. For a long time you were fortunate. You grew up, I assume, in the Molyneux area.
Yes, I did.
And so you had water from a pristine spring, Phillips. And so no bottled water tastes better than that. But we had then to resort to groundwater. And groundwater, the taste is a little bit different. It is what we call a little heavier. But the weight in it provides nutrients. What makes the water taste that way? We say the water is hard. What is hardness? Magnesium, calcium carbonate.
Yes.
What do you need that for? You find it in milk. For strong bones and teeth.
Yes.
All right? So the taste is not very appealing, but the water is of good quality. And we abide by international World Health Organization standards as to what the constituents should be in our water. And let me say something further. If bottled water is not properly monitored, and you abstract too much, you take too much of those minerals out of the water, you create a problem. Because then it becomes a health issue. Where instead the water is providing nutrients from your body is now being leached into that water. And so you have to be very careful.
You know, there are, as I mentioned earlier, that 2 billion people worldwide lack access to safe drinking water. That is phenomenal.
It is.
2 billion.
It is.
And here in St. Kitts and Nevis, what you are saying is that we don't have that problem in terms of safe drinking water.
I don't. Because over the years we have invested in water treatment. And so I must plug one of my workers, Curtis Hobson, we call him Uckers. And for years we were having issues with coming up with the technology to treat the surface supplies, because you know how they operate. We can't take gas tanks and electricity there, because most of our chlorination systems operate with electricity. And sometimes the river comes down and whatever infrastructure you get there is destroyed. But he came up with a design.
Yes.
He came up with a design of a chlorinator, and so we're using that design in all of our systems. And so we have almost universal disinfection of our water supplies now. All of the credit is due to him.
Okay.
Okay. And so we have guys who trod the mountains every single day. They go to Green Hill, they go to Stonefort, they go to Franklands. We have crews who go there to basically clean the intakes every single day. It's a difficult task. It's high topography, very challenging hike. And so credit must be given to them because they're the ones who keep us healthy.
Has there been given any thought to desalination?
Okay. Excellent question. Thought has been given to desalination. Desalination has its main advantage, is that we are islands in the Caribbean Sea. We are surrounded by water and plentiful supply. We can't exhaust the seawater. But it is expensive, highly energy intensive. Okay? So approximate cost, surface water, I would put surface water at about $4-5 per 1,000 gallon to produce it, maybe even less. Groundwater, maybe somewhere around $10-12. Desal is about $30. So very expensive. The other advantage it has, the advantage it has is that, as I said, always available. And even during drought, like in a drought period, if you could have relied on that desal will be okay. But from all reports, we still have significant amount of groundwater yet to be exploited. And so I would figure that we go to drilling groundwater, exhaust that supply, but then we can always have desal as a backup. It should not be our main source of water, as a backup.
Now, most of our water collects in the mountain. Of course, there is more rain that we have in the mountain. And that is because, of course, we have more trees there and the whole process of, evaporation and all of that. And relief rainfall because of the mountain and so on. And we have the source of our water. What is being done to protect that source in the mountain? For example, from contamination and so on. Because I think people have a real fear that people can contaminate that source and then it would affect them.
As I said, we have legislation that prohibits agricultural activity that is a major potential source of contamination. Okay? But we also, as I said, attempt to secure our water source as much as we can. They're fenced with barbed wire, there's a gate and a lock, and there's also a massive sign, government water intake. Trespassers would be prosecuted. Those are the measures we take. We have forest rangers. We collaborate with the Ministry of Sustainable Development Tourism and the forest rangers. And so we also have guys from the department who monitor activities. You see? So those are the steps we are taking. But there still needs to be more collaboration, particularly with tourism, because after all, it is the tour guides from the Ministry of Tourism who issue their licenses who are the main violators.
Yes.
Trespass onto the water sources, take tourists, and sometimes the tourists will make another trip on their own and do things there none of us want them to do. Okay? So we have to take a holistic, collaborative effort in managing this resource.
Okay, so how often do you test the water
Okay.
to make sure that it is safe?
Another excellent question. The water department tests internally, but the real watchdog is the Ministry of Health, Environmental Health.
Okay.
So routinely on a monthly basis, we do our checks internally, both for what we call microorganisms and of course the chemical makeup of the water. And then Health Department do their own independent testing. And so if there is a problem, Health Department calls us, say you need to correct this. If the problem is something that cannot be remedied easily and has significant negative potential,
Yes.
they can shut the supply down. That has not happened. That says that we are doing a relatively good job, but they can do that.
Now, you mentioned that water is relatively cheap, the cost of water in St. Kitts. Now, what sort of a campaign does the Department of Water Services have to raise money for water projects? Because you have to be involved in projects. And are you partnering with any sort of institutions and so on in terms of assistance with some of the water projects that you are involved in?
Okay, let me give you one example. Nevis is just about to complete an infrastructure project funded by the CDB. And I think one of the prerequisites was that Nevis had to agree to review their tariffs. In fact, this year, Nevis's tariff was increased by, I think, 30%.
Yes.
We are now collaborating, not to do a tariff review, but we are now collaborating with the CDB, where we're doing a strategic plan. And that is a plan to move the department forward. It has to do with institutional review, how we operate as a department going forward. Do we remain a department of government or quasi statutory body or something like that? We speak to capital investments in pipes and storage reservoirs and pumps. It speaks to evaluation of our aquifers or groundwater to map the wells to see. So again, on a holistic approach to the long-term development and management of the resource. And that is being done with collaboration of the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank.
Okay, now, water is so important to life. We speak about its social importance. We speak about its economic importance. We speak about the importance in terms of sustaining sustainability, sustaining communities, and so on. Now, we have seen, for example, in St. Kitts, flooding. And we have seen, especially in the College Street gut, a lot of water coming down that gut and going into the ocean. Is there any way that rain water can be harvested at some point rather than just washing down into the sea like that?
Another excellent question. Yes, something can be done, and we have had a proposal. I was on site with the team that came to inspect and do the evaluation, and that is to trap that water upstream somewhere in the Olives area We trap all of that water. We build something like we call a dam.
Mm-hmm.
I did tell you earlier that that water would be expensive to treat for drinking.
Yes.
But what the intention is to kill two birds with one stone. When you trap that water, it no longer washes down College Street Dirt and take cars and humans with it into the ocean. But then we trap that water and we do what we call artificial recharge of the aquifer. So we get the water, we get a pipeline, we put it near the well, and that water goes and is recharging the aquifer. Another wonderful thing happens. It percolates through the soil, it goes through the soil, and it's a natural filtration process. And so that water comes out as clean as ever. So again, that is a soft, a green approach,
Sure.
a sustainable approach to the management of the resource.
Right. Now, when we speak about water, we speak about life. Human life, animal life, plant life. Now, agriculture, the agricultural sector in St. Kitts, of course, is adversely affected whenever we have shortages in terms of water. Can you indicate to us how the water department works along with the agricultural sector in terms of management of water, maybe irrigation, and strategies in terms of how they can use water but not misuse water?
Another excellent question. We have been collaborating with the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of advising water issues. In fact, just last week, 2 weeks ago, myself and representative from the Ministry of Agriculture and the Director of Land and Surveys, Mr. Dwight Francis, did a site visit. What were we doing on the site visit? We were going to select sites
Yes.
for water storage tanks for agriculture. And so what we have done, the Water Department is providing technical expertise in that area. We are trying to refurbish old estate water sources. One in the Capistree area, the Belmont water source, and one in the Olives area, the Buckley's water source. I have visited both of them,
Sure.
and they can provide significant amounts of water for agriculture. In fact, the intention is to eventually run a pipeline, rehabilitate the source and run a pipeline to those tanks to provide water for agriculture. So that is one ongoing project.
Because, Mr. Paul, let's face it, water security is very crucial to food security,
Exactly. Which is crucial to national security.
which is crucial to national security. Because what I have seen water crises in countries and so on, where conflict actually breaks out. And the reason being is that the question is, who has access and who doesn't have access? And conflict actually breaks out in communities because of the access, the availability, and so on with respect to water.
UN General Secretary, he said that the next war is not going to be over oil, it's going to be over water. Okay? It's going to be over water. In terms of agriculture, another thing we are doing, our long-term plan for agricultural water is to eventually convert all of those surface sources, no longer used for domestic use, potable use, but that they be diverted for agricultural use. I know there's a representative here from CADI. I have spoken to the PS in agriculture, and there are discussions in terms of assistance to the Ministry of Agriculture for water development. Okay, so that is ongoing.
Now, do you think that nature-based solutions, or they call them NSBs,
Yes.
are a panacea for the problems that we have with water? Or that they're only part and parcel, because let's face it, nature is facing its own problems. Right? I mean, we speak about rivers drying up, maybe in some places, and in other places we speak about glaciers melting, and so on. The real impact of climate change. So nature in itself is affected. But at the very same time, we are saying that we must find within this affected nature solutions to droughts, floods, and water contamination of water and so on.
We have to.
When some of the problems basically, we can speak about being man-made, but some of the problems are nature, in nature.
They are manifested eventually as natural, but in a lot of instances, the fact that we have floods, the fact that we have drought, man has contributed in some way. Not that all of the responsibility is man's, but man has contributed. And so what are we doing? In fact, that project collaboration with CDB I referenced earlier, it is taking an approach where you are to build resilience to climate change. And how are we building resilience? I said earlier, most of our wells were coastal, they were on the coast. What are we doing now? We are drilling further upstream. Okay? So less chances of impact, because we having sea level is rising. And if the sea level rises, as I said, replaces the fresh water with salt water. You have salt intrusion in an aquifer, in a well, you have to abandon that well. It takes centuries to recover. Okay? So those are some of the things we're doing.
Okay, good. We have to go to the phone lines.
Okay.
And to hear what the people have to say. I'm sure they have many concerns and so on, water concerns. Us all, water is life. And so we'll open the phone lines. I have with me the manager from the St. Kitts Water Services Department, Mr. Dennison Paul, as my guest. The numbers to call are 1-718-577-2916. And the local number is 465-2555. That is, the international number is 1-718-577-2916. And the local number is 465-2555. We await your calls. Working for you, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah, the water gentleman that they are trying to control the water, and we using it in the home. Yeah, the water was coming up from West Farm area. That treated?
Excuse me, sir.
The water that using in the West Farm area, that treated?
Yes, that water is chlorinated. It comes from either Frankland's or Winfield source, and it is treated and chlorinated.
Okay, nice. But you're telling us how to control water in the home from wasting.
Yes, sir.
But you ain't said nothing about construction and going on out there and car washing and whatnot.
Yes.
If you have a real serious water problem, you cannot have construction working going on, mixing concrete, tourist boat to get water. 4 tourist boats using water that out to test. So you got to control the concrete mixing as well as how you're telling us we do it in the home. There's nothing wrong with what you are saying. But you need to say to them. Okay.
Okay, so thank you for your input.
Working for you, good afternoon. Hello? There's no one on the line.
Okay. If I may respond to the good gentleman, in terms of cruise ships, since the advent of the drought in 2015, We have not given water to any cruise ships. In terms of the construction industry, we would prefer if they don't waste water, but construction does not use that much water, so we have to stop construction. It's a vital part of the economy and we don't want to put people out of bread. And so all we ask is that they use the water wisely and don't waste. In terms of washing of vehicles, we have made it clear in release after release that folks should not be washing vehicles with water hoses. We have advised that they use buckets. And in the event you're using a hose, that hose must have a nozzle on it.
Seem to have another caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Greetings. This is your hygiene solution. We need a lot of solutions, man.
Greetings.
Yes, my brethren. Greetings to all the panels and all the listeners out there. Yes, a lot of rainwater go to the sea. Every village have guts, our guts. Every village. And if you have to go way up in the mountain area, not where you have the deep guts, where you cannot flex and walk, but areas where you have pools, where clean, pure water you could drink in some very large pools in basically all the villages. They could contain these pools now with concrete in the floors, seal them off properly so no dirt and dust could get in, and then this will supply portable and also permanent tanks in that same area, and the water would not be able to build up that pressure in the mountain gushing down like College Street. But all other areas where the water could be controlled, it have to be a distance up enough where the water is clean, where people go up there and get drinking water, just like spring water. We do that, and we will be, like this, cooking and gas.
Okay. Thank you for your...
Yeah. I would listen after you to hear the response.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You raised some good points. Before the advent of groundwater, that is what we did. Around the island, each little community had a source, a freshwater source, a surface source. But you know what? These sources are low flow. The good ones we're using now, the high flowing ones we're using now, like in Old Road and Green Hill and Phillips. But tell you what, the water underground, we have one well in the Bastille Valley Aquifer that gives you more water per day than Green Hill does.
This one, we have a call. Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, sir.
And your panel, and Mr. Good gentleman there. I have
Mr.
a two-part
Paul.
question. One pertains to the health. Earlier you stated that you use chlorine to purify the water from bacteria and the like. Is it the chlorine that we have in Clorox that we use for the washing purposes and certain purification in terms of making the clothes white?
Yes.
Is it the same content?
Yes.
In terms of its biology?
It's the same active ingredient, yes. But we use it in very, very low doses.
Yes. So what effect does that have on the body? Say like long term. And my other part of the question is recently we have seen our sister island Nevis. There are times when we might borrow from the other island, and there are times when the other island might borrow from us in terms of ideas. We have seen a hike in terms of their water price. Is there any plan in the future we would do likewise in terms of because we have to maintain our water resource, and of course Mr. Williams asked a question as to how you go about maintaining the water. Where do you source the money from? Is that a measure that you will initiate in the future the way Nevis have done it in terms of the price in the feed. Thanks for listening. I'll listen off here.
Thank you, sir. Excellent questions. We have
Hello.
Hello, yes, working for you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm just here. I'm trying to thank Mr. Paul. He was at the industrial site yesterday by Jarrow, and I spoke to him concerning the matter, and it was well delivered. I got a call this morning to say that they were going by the house to try and get the problem solved. So I'm just thanking him for what he has done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Paul, it's all yours.
Okay, I would address the one with chlorine. Chlorine is a universal disinfectant in terms of the water supply. It is cheap, readily available, very effective. The main advantage is that the residual is a little bit extra to meet contaminants along the way. Like every other chemical, chlorine has some side effects. Usually, the problem would be if that water is not purified before it is chlorinated, then you can have problems. But if the water is purified before you apply the chlorine, there has been no link to any maleffects. So first of all, you must pre-treat, what you call pre-treat the water before you chlorinate. In terms of St. Kitts and Nevis, the tariff, I have always advocated for a fair tariff, at least if we can at least get cost recovery.
Yes.
But we don't want to put the burden on people who can ill afford, and so we think that people who can afford to pay should pay, and they're paying in other jurisdictions. I'm certain they can pay here. And again, water is highly subsidized by government. The government subsidizes the water department, so a lot of the capital inputs are subsidized.
Okay. Now, some of those pipes that were laid so many years ago, some of them are perhaps in need of replacing. Some of them might be rusty, creating some health hazard to the water and so on. I don't know. I'm just saying. So how often do you change the pipelines? Because some of them I think are over 50 years old.
Pipelines are corroded if they are of metal origin, but the pipes are supposed to last 50, 60 years. When we get concerned is not necessarily the corrosion, we can flush that out. When we get concerned is when the diameter of the pipe reduces. So the corrosion builds up. You had a 4-inch pipe, now you have a half-inch pipe. And so the flow is reduced. Okay? But there's another thing we do. I don't know if I should bring this subject up, but there has been the talk of connection between asbestos pipe and drinking water. Studies have shown, WHO has shown that there is no link to cancer or any other disease from asbestos using asbestos pipe for drinking water. What is the danger is using asbestos, the dust, when you work with asbestos. All guys used to work with asbestos cement pipes. What we are doing now is that we're replacing all our asbestos cement pipes with PVC pipes. Okay? So drinking water that flows through asbestos cement pipe should not affect you. If you inhale it through your lungs, then you have issues. It's a carcinogen.
Okay. Now, how do you know how much chlorine to put in the water? It might be like a stupid question.
It is a very good question. Very good question. There are standards, like everything else. The WHO has standards for chlorine concentrations in water. So what we do, for example, at the water treatment plant, we have the water incoming. We have what we call a chlorinator, a piece of equipment that continuously chlorinates the water. As the water comes in, it adds chlorine to it. And there's a dosing mechanism to say, okay, so many pounds per day. All right? But then we have a safety at the end, where we have a kit where we use to measure the concentration of chlorine before it leaves the plant. And so we monitor on an hourly basis. We're dosing, we know what we're dosing. As a double check, as a safety matter, we check the residual at the end to see how much chlorine. If the chlorine is in excess, we don't allow the water out of the plant.
Right.
Okay?
But in some places that I've noticed, for example, where I live in Molyneux and so on, the water is not as heavily chlorinated as it is in Bastille. Do you know why?
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the answer. You'll be surprised at the answer. The water is chlorinated the same way as it is in Bastille. You know what the difference is? The difference is because of the hardness of the groundwater in Bastille,
it has a different
taste.
taste.
A taste like chlorine. And so people confuse the two. If you chlorinate hard water, groundwater, it imparts a taste. If your water, as it is from the spring, you put chlorine, the taste is very mild. So that's the difference.
Oh, that I always never liked
Yes.
to drink the water in town from the pipe. But of course I can drink it from Molyneux. Tastes much better. You know? Great. So you spoke about managing, of course, the water quality. And I suppose that was the concern of the gentleman who called.
Yes.
You know, so that basically was addressed. What about managing the water-related risks?
Example.
For example, well, I suppose that will go back as well to managing the water quality. We spoke about the contamination. That's some of the risk.
Okay. I understand where you're going. For example, risk. Risk of someone going into a water tank and doing something that they shouldn't do. Pouring something that they shouldn't. And so the government has invested for years in securing our water facilities. At the water treatment plant, the Lagate water treatment plant, we have 24-hour security.
Yes.
We have lights, we have fencing. At most of our water storage tanks, we have covers that we have locks. We are progressing to fence some of them. Most of our wells, the well sites, most of them are fenced and locked. And so that is one where we protect the water quality and reduce risk. The issue of going to the water intake every day, that again is to reduce risk. What if there is some contaminant there? The guys are there every day, they're in a position to remove it or to shut down the system before it gets to the general public. We have had instances. When I started at the water department, I worked in water quality and I worked at the water treatment plant, and there were times where we had to shut the system down because something happened. Okay, so we're being proactive, we shut the system down, get it corrected, and then we start distributing water.
Okay, now Mr. Paul, in terms of customer service at the department, for example, when the water will be shut off, what times it would be available, communication in general to the public is extremely important, especially when you have water shortage, water rationing, and so on, because then it allows people to know how to manage their lives in terms of when it will be on, what they can do and what they can't do, and all of that sort of a thing. What is the department doing to ensure that there's effective communication in terms of what's happening?
Another excellent question. I do a lot of the media work, so I issue releases all the time. Of course, there's Skynet and the other media houses. But there is one thing, I get some complaints, because I think a lot of the time the general public is not aware how the water system works. For example, electricity. If electricity, that power is going to be out by 10 o'clock, all an operator has to do is flick a switch or remove a fuse. And instantaneously, the city of Bastille could be out of electricity by one switch. Electricity travels very, 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 very fast. Water is different. Water is stored in our system. We have gravity-fed systems. The water is stored on a hill, let's say in Bird Rock. And so if someone near that hill in Bird Rock, if the water is shut off, that person loses the water almost instantaneously. But the person on Irish Town Bay Road, they might never lose the water.
Okay,
so
we have someone on the line. We'll continue from where you left off. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, working for you. Question for Mr. Dennison Paul. With all the housing stock that is being built now and into the future, the proposed hotels, the Ritz-Carlton, the Six Seasons, the other one down just west of Camps, and all the other things. This is going to put additional pressure on the limited resources that we have. And I already mentioned about things, about climate change and continuous drought. We don't know what the future holds. Are there any considerations being given to using desalting plant or reverse osmosis to assist or to relieve the future water shortage problems that we might experience in St. Kitts? Thank you. I'll listen up here.
Okay. Yes, sir. That is under consideration. And let me say, I sit on the planning board, Development Control and Planning Board. And one proposal we have put to government is that folks should, during construction, have storage in their homes. On-site storage tanks. Or you can build systems during construction, or you can get a black tank. That will help. But in terms of desal, as I said, I sit on the board, and proposals come to the board. Hyatt, for example, Hyatt came, and we said, Hyatt, hey, we can't provide you with water. You would be required to construct a desal plant. Hyatt has a desal plant now. Marriott has a desal plant because we could not meet the water demands. Christoph Harbour is in the early stages of constructing a desal plant. So we are looking at that option. As I said, this is expensive. We prefer if government doesn't get involved in it. But it is critical. But as I said, we have groundwater resources, and we are convinced that we should explore that option before we go to desal. Desal as a buffer, as a backup, but mainly groundwater still.
Sure. Now let us continue in terms of that the communication aspect.
Yes.
Of the department.
Yes. Which I was saying that we've had complaints that someone would call and say, but you said the water would go off at 5 o'clock. My water went off at 8 o'clock, or it didn't go off at all. Or you said it would go off at 5, mine went off at 5, and other people's water did not go. I was saying that is a result of the design of our systems. Our systems are gravity fed, and the topography of the country, the hilliness of the country. So there's a reservoir at the top of a Birdwalk Hill, and there's someone who lives just under the hill, just below. Their water would go almost instantaneously. As soon as we shut the valve, the water might go. But someone at Irish Town Bay Road, Newtown Bay Road, the water might not go after 6, 7, 8 hours. And so a lot of times folks get confused. It's not like electricity. When we say the water is going at 4, it might not go at 4. When he says it's going to come at 2, it might not come at 2. We open up the valve to put the water back on at 2 o'clock. And if you live way to the top of the hill, you're the last person going to get water. The person who lives downstream, they're going to get water first. And then the water builds up gradually, comes to the top.
Reaches.
Right. So when we say we shut the water off at 2, we turn the valve off at 2. But it will take some time for you to lose the water or for you to get the water back.
Now, in terms of feedback from the public, in terms of the quality of the water service, what mechanism do you have in place for that? And how is that basically functioning?
Forum like this help, except that they're not year-round, usually around this month and next month. But we have suggestion box. We have suggestion boxes. When folks come into the office, supervisor sometimes ask them about the experience. We had a Facebook page that's giving us some issues now, but we intend to get that Facebook page back online. We are dealing with a very young generation, and so if we intend to meet them, the best option will be social media. Sure. So we are trying to get that back up.
Sure. Now, the other morning I was in the shower doing my ablutions, and the water just went on me like that.
Okay.
I suppose that sometimes you have to deal with these cases when there is no announcement, for example, and the water is just shut off. Somebody's on the line. Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello?
Hello.
Working for you?
Yes.
Yes. Number one, I would like your guest to repeat the number that he gave in the event that we see water waste in our pipe breakage and so on. And then I have this question for him. What if there are persons who are in a position, they have the money to dig their own wells and so on, and let's assume that all conditions are conducive. Technical expert, the underground water everything is okay. Is there anything to prevent private citizens from digging their own well? I will listen off air, and could he kindly repeat the number again, please? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The number is 4658,000, 4658 And very interesting question, but that is probably, that question will be answered, I think, above my pay grade.
Okay, we have another call.
Hey,
Working for you, good afternoon.
good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon, Mr. Water Engineer. Lego
Good
Water.
afternoon, sir.
Now, Mr. Engineer, I just hear you say that what citizens should do is try and build water system in our yard so that we can help to conserve the source that the government has. That is what a caller earlier, the clock, was telling you, that y'all should dam some of the water up further up in the hills up there and cover it, that it can be used for whatever it is. Because I remember when I was growing up on the estate where I was born and raised, every tractor road had some little hole on the right side and left side to catch the force of water that would come down and go down to the lowest gravity. We used to call them sluice. And from the moment they're done with the sugar, or just before they're done with the sugar, they hold them full up and they leave them. And that is one of the reasons why you see so much water that come down in the gut. All the gut them and cause havoc when they reach down there, because they don't have no catchment further up to take the pressure off of the tongue. So if we could dig some go back and freshen up those holes and build them in a kind of way like the caller suggests, we can use those waters for even farming. All they have to do is go up with a pump truck and pull up the truck and go with it. You know, that's my little suggestion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, caller. Always interesting suggestions. But that makes a lot of sense. In fact, the water department has suffered since the closure of the sugar industry, because even the roads, they maintain the roads to the water sources, they maintain the roads to some of our wells. But the point the caller made makes a lot of sense, because what happens when you construct those sluices, the water has retention time. The water percolates in the soil, and that helps to recharge the aquifer. And that is a nature-based solution.
Yes.
An excellent example of what we were talking about. No grey infrastructure like concrete or whatever. This is just a natural solution. And so we have to employ more of this. We don't have the capacity to do it, but I know I have been in contact with agriculture and other departments of influence, so that we can continue to maintain those roads, those access roads, like agriculture did.
Sure.
And I am amazed at the knowledge folks in agriculture had. We are now being advised to revert to the techniques they use. These are the nature-based solutions we're talking about.
Sure.
Right? And so they did it well, and I think we should learn from them.
Sure. Now, we don't drink distilled water, let's face it. But at the very same time, when we speak about water pollution and so on, we have to take into consideration our oceans. And people throwing trash in guts, dead animals in guts, the contamination on the beach and so on, and then the seawater then becomes contaminated, and then that kills fish and other marine life and so on. So while we're talking about fresh water, potable drinking water, we have to be concerned about, you know, the water in our rivers and our seas and all of that sort of a thing as well, because it's all water and it is all about life.
You've heard the concept from ridge to reef. So from the mountain to the sea, we have to manage that. It has to be a holistic approach. But you made a good point. Years ago, when I was a young man, I was involved in a United Nations environmental project. And that job was to monitor the coastline. So I would be taking water samples from Fisherman's Wharf all the way to the Atlantic side of Frigate Bay to test the quality of the water. And you would be amazed at the quality in certain places. I don't think it has gotten any better. How did it get that way? We have wastewater, maybe grey water as we call it, and probably not from toilets, coming down College Street gutter and west, where does it end up? In the ocean.
Yes.
We have a market that is in close proximity to the ocean. We have apartments with wastewater systems, treatment systems that are not working efficiently. And so contamination is had that way. We have to protect ourselves because we swim in the ocean, don't we?
And there's fish in the ocean.
And there's fish in the ocean.
And
And
all
so
of marine life.
we cannot rely on government to solve all of these problems. The board has decided, Development and Planning Board, that when you build your wastewater system, your grey water must go with your black water. The black water is what you flush when you're number 2. The grey water is from the sink and the shower and all that. That should be kept in the system. That should not be running down the drain. Eventually rain falls, and that contributes
Yes.
to contamination of our marine waters.
And the prevention of, Mr. Paul, of flooding in certain areas as well.
Yes.
What happens sometimes is that the drains are blocked and we throw our garbage and so on, and the drains become blocked, and so there is no way for water to
Exactly.
to exit and all of that sort of a thing, creating flooding.
Exactly. And fish life, the plastic bottles, the nets, whatever, they entangle fishes and fish life. We need the fish to survive. So it's a vicious circle. And so if we can, as I say, sustainably manage the resource from ridge to reef, from mountain to sea, it will redound to the benefit of
Right.
all of us.
Yes, I began saying the other day I was, taking a shower and water went and so on. And it's a lucky thing that I had one of those island purified bottle, yes, the gallon one. And I had to resort to using that to actually finish my thing. And then it dawned on me that, look, how much water I actually waste when I am taking my shower. Because that 1 gallon bottle, I was able to use it and to do what I had to do.
This might be a plug for Island Purified. They're supposed to be competing in some way, but I'm going to give them the plug. I have 20 of those bottles filled with water every day. In the case I'm out of water, I have 20 of those gallon bottles.
Right.
Yes. And so I have showered with less than half at one point. And so it goes to show how much water we waste on a daily basis. As I say, it's a culture. It's how we socialize, it's how we develop. It's going to take time to change that behavior. And bit by bit, we're trying to spread the message. As I said, the message, the gospel of water conservation. Let us all take responsibility.
Sure. Mr. Paul, we're out of time. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
Well, I would like the general public to support our activities, especially the Watercade. And if I came here for no other reason, it is to tell our people that we should conserve water, we should use water wisely. I gave a number of tips recently. I gave the classic example of Antigua. And so if all of us commit to do something, to use a little less water, it can go a long way. If all of us in St. Kitts shower for half the time we shower every morning, we do not have a water problem. I can guarantee you that. Because we waste it and we don't see it. I am not saying that we've been unpatriotic or anything like that and we don't give the hoots about the country.
Sure.
But as I said, it's behavior that has been learned over years and we expect it to change and we're advocating for that change. So, in closing, I would want to thank you for inviting me here. I would like to thank the general public for listening and being as interactive as they were. And I leave with, let us conserve the water. Water is life. Every drop counts. That is our motto.
Well, Mr. Paul, I want to thank you so much. for coming on this program and to speaking about something that is so essential to life, that of water, that is sometimes taken for granted and not appreciated. It's not a resource that is sometimes appreciated as it should. And I mentioned in the beginning that 60% of the adult human body is made up of water. I need not say anything else. And in some organisms, it's 90%.
What is life?
Water is life.
Okay. I want to end on a sad note to say that effective this evening, 10 o'clock, going forward, we'll be rationing in Keon and Keys. Our levels have dropped significantly there and we have no choice. So starting this evening, 10 o'clock tonight to 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, water will be off in Keon. We'll advise you accordingly if there are any changes.
You're getting closer to me, you know.
You're going to be okay. We had a major infrastructure project in your area 2 years ago. $600,000 was pumped into that area. And so you have what we call redundancy in your system.
Well,
you have well and you have surface water. When one go, you can rely on the other.
I am very pleased to hear that.
You're secure.
There's water security in my... But
yes.
It's what we wish for the entire island.
Exactly.
Mr. Paul, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You have been listening to another edition of Working for You. I am your host, Les Roy Williams. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's program. Those of you who called in and gave your constructive suggestions and so on, we thank you very, very much. We will be back next week for another edition of Working for You. Until then, see you.
Working for You. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Les Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.